This video will go over the basics of using Google Forms. So we're going to start by signing in to our Suffield student account. Enter your password and click enter. So we're going to start by using the 9Tile app launcher. You can find Google Forms straight from here if you click on more. There it is, Google Forms. But like I said in my other videos, I like to start in Google Drive to make sure that my form or whatever I'm using in Google Drive is in its proper location or folder. This just keeps things organized, and it's much easier down the road to find things when they're all organized. So I'm going to create a new folder for, let's say, science. And in my science folder, I'm going to use Google Forms to create maybe a quiz or a survey. So like I did right here, hit the plus new sign, go down to Google Forms, which is under the More section. Then you'll see a little arrow here to the right. You can start by using a blank form or from a template. I find the templates to be very helpful in Google Forms, so I'm going to show you how to do that. So click on Start from a Template. Here you will see you have some options, which is nice. You can start with a blank quiz, an exit ticket, an assessment, a worksheet, or a course evaluation. Let's start with a blank quiz. So under the blank quiz here, the first thing you want to do, like with any other of the Google G Suite apps, is name it. Give your file a name. So for here, I'm going to write Science Quiz 1. Again, if you want to star it to make sure you can find it easily and bookmark it, you can click on the star. And you could move it to a different folder if you just started off by clicking on Google Forms right away instead of going through Drive. So here are basic options of how this Google form is set up. Here you'll see you have a questions tab, and this is where all of your questions will be recorded. And here, once you actually give this to students to use and they fill it out, here's where you'll actually see all of the students' responses. So let's go through some quick formatting of Google Forms. Up top here, this little art palette icon is for you to change the color of this background banner, or you can also click on the image icon, and you can select from any of these images from the catalog here that fit. So maybe I'll use this one for science. So you can click on it and then hit select. So here's my theme or my background for my Google form. The next thing is the preview button. So once you enter in your information, you can click on preview. I'll show you, and it'll give you an idea of what it will look like from the student view. So the next piece of formatting is clicking on the settings icon. Here you will see settings that you have under General, Presentation, and Quizzes. Under General, if you select Collect Email Address, this means that when your students sign on, they'll have to enter their email address. Require sign-in, you definitely want to leave this clicked that you have to restrict users to only Suffield Public Schools. Limit to one response, this means that you only want your students to be able to have one chance to take this quiz. You usually want them only to do this once. Respondents can edit after they submit and see summary charts and text responses. Usually you don't want your students to go back and edit after they submit a quiz, so I'm going to leave that unchecked, and I typically don't want them to be able to see a summary chart and responses. Under the next settings tab is presentation. Show progress bar will allow the students to see how much they've completed and how much is left. Shuffle question order. This is important usually because you don't want students to be able to look at other people's screens while taking the quiz, so it's good to have the questions in a different order. Show link to submit another response. Because I selected limit to one response, this is not available. The show link to submit a response would basically be at the end of the form. The students would be able to follow a link to submit another quiz or another response. I don't want them to take it twice, like I said. That's why I only limited them to one response. So this here is not available. If I unclicked this, limit to one response, I would be able to give them a link to submit another quiz, but I don't want them to do that. So just one response only. And then the confirmation message here could be something like great job, or good work finishing up your quiz. Or it could be a direction. If this is maybe a quiz they're taking in class or a quick little review, it could be something like what they're supposed to do next, like make sure you're working on your notebook organizer, or you can give them a link to follow to go to another activity when they're done with their quiz. So this is pretty helpful as to what they should be doing next when they're done with their quiz. And then here under the quizzes tab, this is where you can actually make this a formal quiz where you're assigning point values to each question and allowing the form to auto grade it for you. If you don't want this to be a formal quiz, you just want it to be like a different, maybe a little exit ticket or some other type of form, you don't have to always make it a quiz, so you would just uncheck that. If you do want it to be a quiz, you have to decide whether or not you want the students to be able to see their grade immediately after they take it or later. So this is something that you have to choose. Maybe you have some students absent, then you definitely want the grades to be released maybe later, because then you can decide whether or not you want students to be able to view their missed questions and view the correct answers. Again, this will be dependent on whether or not you think you want your students to be able to share the info they saw on the quiz, or they won't share the info they saw. So this is all very dependent on what you're doing. Once you're done with your settings, click Save. The next thing you'll see up here is the Send button, which is how you would share this form out. When you're sharing a form, it's very similar to sharing anything else on the G Suite. So you want to make sure that you're only sharing it to your students, right? Or maybe if you're sending out a survey for your colleagues, same thing. If you're sending this via email, it might be kind of tedious to type in all of your students' emails. So another thing you can do is just get a shareable link, very similar to getting a shareable link for a Google Doc. You would just copy and paste it, and you can, again, hyperlink it into your classroom, your Google Classroom, or a different document you're using, or a website that you might have created. You can use this shorten URL button to get a shorter link that older students will probably be able to type if you want to just like post on the board or whatnot. These little bracket buttons are pretty useful. This is your embed URL, which means that if you were to copy and paste this, you can actually embed it into a form or into another, like I said, into your Google Classroom. This way the form or your quiz would appear right then and there, right inside the website. So depending on how long the quiz is, you may or may not want to do that. Again, so you have a few options here to email it out, or to get a link, or to get an embed link. Then you want to fill the rest in depending on what you're doing. Finally, here you have to add collaborators. So let's say you're creating a quiz and you want to send it over to a colleague to have them review. Let's say you're collaborating on a unit of study together, or maybe you want to send out a form and you want to collaborate with somebody. So remember, it's not always a quiz, it could be any type of form. So this is where you would, again, make sure that you have your settings to what you want them to be. If you don't want the people that you give this form to send it out and change it, you definitely want to click on the bottom, prevent editors from changing access and adding new people. So once you decide that you want to either share this form with somebody or you want to email it out as a quiz, that's how you would do it under the Send button. Next, over here, under our three little vertical tabs, this is where you kind of get to decide, again, some of the functionality of using this Google form is all right under here. Now, let's actually get into the making a quiz. So here you want to give your quiz a title, so I'm just going to type in Science Quiz 1. Form description. You can actually add in a little description of what this is about. Maybe I could say this is our first quiz from our first unit, whatever that might be. And it says this form is automatically collecting email addresses for the Suffield Public users. That's because under my settings, that's what I actually wanted them to do. So if you don't want that, you can uncheck it. Now, here under the questions section, this is where you get to use the plus sign to add a question. You can add a title and a description, meaning you can click this to add maybe directions. If you want to add an image as part of a question, you can click on the image button. If you want to add a video, you click on the little play button. And if you want to add a section, you click on this little two bars. All of these are kind of self-explanatory except for this section. If you click on a section, it's pretty useful if you want to do some differentiation, meaning Once I add a section here, let's say I want to add another section. So if I have a question 1 here, I'm just going to type question 1, and then I have question 2. So if a student gets question 1 wrong, I can decide whether I want them to go to question 2 or question 3 or any other part of this form that I have set up. This is a useful option for when, let's say, you're doing maybe not a quiz per se, but maybe a review, and a student gets something wrong. So let's say they get question 1 wrong, instead of going to question 2, which might be the next question in line, I might have them go to a different section, which might be question number 3. That might be a review video or a review activity for them to do. And that'll be a way that you can differentiate using the sections option. So let's go back to a question. Here, if you click on multiple choice, that's our setting default for the types of question. But if you click on that, you will see that there's all different types of questions that you can set up here in the Google Forms. So once I decide to whichever type of question I would like, then you have to fill it out. So you would type in your question, option 1, add another, option 2, add another, option 3. Typically, multiple choice has 4 options here. What's interesting about Google Forms is that notice when I put my cursor over the question and then here I have a image box, so I can add an image to the question. I can add an image to each of these responses, which depending on what you're doing could be super helpful. So that's the little fun part about that. On the bottom here you have answer key. This is also pretty important because you have to designate which option is correct. So let's just say I have option 3 is correct here. You click on it. You could also add answer feedback. So for incorrect answers or correct answers, you can either give a hint or just say something encouraging, or you could say great job if they get it correct. What's also pretty neat about this is that you can add in a link to send them if they get it wrong. Maybe you want to send them to a review link or you want to send them to a review video. So that's another way to differentiate there if you're using this as a review tool maybe. And then you want to also assign points here. If this is a actual quiz with an assigned value, then you want to go ahead and assign points here to each of these questions depending on what you're working with. And so that's how you basically set up a multiple choice question. On the bottom here, you want to make this required. You want to make all of your quiz questions required unless it's an extra credit question. The 3 vertical dots down here allows you to do some other things like add a description or go to a section based on an answer, shuffle option order. So these are all useful tools when creating a quiz. So that's basically how it works. Once you're all done with this, like I said, you will go up to the send corner, the send button, and then that's how you'll decide how you want to share or give this quiz out to your students. Now let's go back and quickly look at the other options for a Google form. Remember, it's not just for quizzes, it could be for other things as well. So let's go back into my Google Drive here under my science folder. I'm going to click new. I'm going to click Google Forms. I'm going to use a template. And then you can see here that you have an exit ticket, an assessment, a worksheet. So these are all things that you can use as a template, which is pretty nice as a starting point. So again, it's kind of set up all the same way, which is really nice. This is a generic template, so you can obviously go in here and change any of these questions. You can change the responses. Again, you can add in a video, a picture, break it up into sections. You can add directions for this. And that's basically how they all work. They're all very similar. One thing that is important to note on any type of form, whether it's a quiz or an exit ticket, this is where you will see your students' responses. What's nice about using Google Forms is that you can again click this little green spreadsheet icon and it will create a spreadsheet for you with all of the data collected from the Google form. And again, these little 3 vertical buttons give you some options here as far as what you can do with the responses. So that's the general overview of how you use Google Forms.